All right, testing on two.
This is
Actually, can probably from a background still noisy.
no, it's not.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Did you trade it? Change it?
Hi, thanks for joining, Bodhi. Can we just test your audio quickly?
Yeah, is it working?
Yes, it's good. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Solange.
Good morning.
Good morning. We just want to test out your audio.
Perfect.
Let's see. Cool. How are you doing? Good?
Better reset your password and join now.
How are you doing, Doctor?
Hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm doing fine, thank you. And Dr. Malcolm is trying to connect.
Yes.
Small problem, yeah.
Is anybody new password?
Yeah, we have to reset the passwords. We don't keep Zoom passwords.
Oh gosh.
It's okay.
So everyone, I'll begin to make today's panel live, and we'll start with sharing of graphics that would last for 10 minutes, and then we should get started at least by 9:05 with the opening session.
We will not stand by and accept the irreversible damage that is happening to our planet. We can choose to fight.
Climate change is everyone's responsibility, and everyone needs to be involved.
Sport has remained a symbol of hope that can unite individuals.
In sport, we have the power to enact change.
Sport is that one unique unifier that can bring people together.
We as athletes, whether we like it or not, are role models.
The sports community can play a major role in bringing awareness to the issue of climate change.
Sports can take a lead and help empower people to take the actions necessary.
That's what's so unifying about sport. Everyone is united by the same end goal.
Around the world, we're already seeing the impacts of climate change. In recent months, there's been extreme flooding, extreme heat,
biodiversity loss, pollution, marine exploitation.
Crop failure and wildfire events make that abundantly clear.
So we must act now, we must act together.
Together, we can kick it to climate change.
We will not stand by and accept the irreversible damage that is happening to our planet. we can choose to fight.
Climate change is everyone's responsibility, and everyone needs to be involved.
Sport has remained a symbol of hope that can unite individuals.
In sport, we have the power to enact change.
Sport is that one unique unifier that can bring people together.
We as athletes, whether we like it or not, are role models.
The sports community can play a major role in bringing awareness to the issue of climate change.
Sports can take a lead and help empower people to take the actions necessary.
That's what's so unifying about sport. Everyone is united by the same end goal.
Around the world, we're already seeing the impacts of climate change. In recent months, there's been extreme flooding, extreme heat,
Biodiversity loss, pollution, marine exploitation.
crop failure and wildfire events make that abundantly clear.
So we must act now. We must act together.
Together, we can kick it to climate change.
We will not stand by and accept the irreversible damage that is happening to our planet. We can choose to fight.
Climate change is everyone's responsibility, and everyone needs to be involved.
Sport has remained a symbol of hope that can unite individuals.
In sport, we have the power to enact change.
Sport is that one unique unifier that can bring people together.
We as athletes, whether we like it or not, are role models.
The sports community can play a major role in bringing awareness to the issue of climate change.
Sports can take a lead and help empower people to take the actions necessary.
That's what's so unifying about sport. Everyone is united by the same end goal.
Around the world, we're already seeing the impacts of climate change. In recent months, there's been extreme flooding, extreme heat,
Biodiversity loss, pollution, marine exploitation.
crop failure and wildfire events make that abundantly clear.
So we must act now. We must act together.
Together, we can kick it to climate change.
We will not stand by and accept the irreversible damage that is happening to our planet. We can choose to fight.
Climate change is everyone's responsibility, and everyone needs to be involved.
Sport has remained a symbol of hope that can unite individuals.
In sport, we have the power to enact change.
Sport is that one unique unifier that can bring people together.
We as athletes, whether we like it or not, are role models.
The sports community can play a major role in bringing awareness to the issue of climate change.
Sports can take a lead and help empower people to take the actions necessary.
That's what's so unifying about sport. Everyone is united by the same end goal.
Around the world, we're already seeing the impacts of climate change. In recent months, there's been extreme flooding, extreme heat,
Biodiversity loss, pollution, marine exploitation.
crop failure and wildfire events make that abundantly clear.
So we must act now. We must act together.
Together, we can kick it to climate change.
Good morning, good evening, good night, wherever you are across planet Earth. At this time, I want to begin by informing you if you require Spanish or French translation, please select the interpretation icon to the bottom of your screen. Distinguished guests, participants, and panelists from all countries across planet Earth, welcome to our 5th annual Global Youth Network Summit. I remembered when I started the conceptualization of this summit, it was held in Barbados. And at the time I was only 16 years old, and we were discussing the impact of non-communicable diseases on the lives of children. From then, we went on to have another summit with many ambassadors and UN diplomats that was centered around the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and the role that us as young persons have to play. And since the inception of the Hey campaign, I've continued this summit through focusing on topics such as climate change and health. And last year it was focused on sports for climate action. And this year I'm super excited because we're focusing on climate change and the impact that it is having on women and children's mental health. This summit today is being hosted by the Lashley Foundation in partnership with the Clara Lionel Foundation, Open Societies Foundations, and UNICEF. I am Lashley, your host for this historic Global Youth Network Summit on climate change and its impact on women and children's mental health. So friends, according to a study by Stone, Blend, and Spencer, they stated that while the physical impacts of climate change are an active area of research, works related to mental health impacts are least developed. The United Nations stated that women's vulnerability to climate change stems from a number of factors, social, economic, and cultural. And I know that we can agree on these things today. 70% of 1.3 billion people living in conditions of poverty are women. In urban areas, 40% of the poorest households are headed by women. Women have limited access to and control of environmental goods and services. They have negligible participation in decision-making spaces and are not involved in the distribution of environment management benefits. Consequently, women are least able to confront climate change. During extreme weather events, such as droughts and floods, women tend to work more to secure household livelihoods. This will leave less time for women to access training, education, develop skills, or earn more income. Climate change will be that added stressor that will aggravate women's vulnerability. It is widely known that during conflict, women face heightened levels of domestic violence, human trafficking, and rape. Furthermore, mental health impacts of climate change on women are a particular area of interest to us due to women's disproportionately negative experiences with climate change and climate change related events. Only back in August, the United Nations Children's Fund reported that half of the world's 2.2 billion children are at an extreme high risk from the impacts of climate change. More than 230 healthcare journals have since published a joint editorial calling for more urgent action to address the catastrophic harm to health from climate change. And despite these many warnings that we see daily, surprisingly, little has been written about the mental health consequences of climate change on children and their lives. This is the reason why we are all here today, to discuss the need for more focus on the impact of climate change on women and children's mental health. In 2021, a female Hey ambassador for Dominica highlighted the mental toll caused by the complete devastation of her country after Hurricane Maria in 2017. In her recollection of events, she noted how her family and her family's entire life was completely devastated after the destruction of socio-economic structures which previously afforded them the opportunity to things such as running water. Based in the Caribbean, the Hey campaign stands as not just observers, but as a frontline participant in the climate crisis across our citizens, but more specifically, our women, our youth, girls, and boys. So the Hey campaign essentially is a youth-led campaign on climate change and health, and it was officially launched in April 2020 by the Lashley Foundation in partnership with UNICEF Eastern Caribbean Area Office. And this campaign aims to bring together youth and children from around the world together in their diversity to advocate for shared values, promoting life and dignity rather than economic growth alone. So through We Are Hey, we want to show what we mean by being healthy and environmentally friendly youth and express our wishes and dreams for a better future. Now more than ever, we must focus far more attention on strengthening the psychosocial support of our children and our women. Today's summit is designed to examine all pertinent issues related to climate change and its impact on women and children's mental health under 3 thematic sessions entitled Strengthening Climate Action, Women and Girls Leading the Response, Women and Children's Mental Health in the Climate Crisis, and the inclusive action, the role of women and the inclusion of vulnerable groupings. During this Global Youth Summit today, we will premiere our video entitled Climate Change and its Impact on Women and Children's Mental Health. And right about now, I want to encourage you all to share your countries in the chat because we know you're tuning in from all across the world. I am super excited for today's panel discussions, and so to you. At this time, I am honored and delighted to introduce to you a distinguished fellow, Dr. Tarolyn Malcolm, advisor of non-communicable diseases and mental health at the Pan American Health Organization, World Health Organization, to deliver the introductory remarks. Over to you, Dr. Malcolm.
Thank you, Ashley, and good morning, everyone. And congratulations on all the work that the foundation has been doing. So on behalf of PAHO WHO representative, Dr. Amalia Del Rego, thanks for the invitation to participate in this dialogue. And with me is Dr. Solans Colby Jackson, our advisor for family and community health. And we're both pleased to be part of this Global Youth Network Summit to contribute to the discussion on climate change, women's and children's mental health. So mental health conditions already represent a significant burden worldwide, even without climate change. And the situation for mental health globally is already challenging. So the world faces an incredible climate crisis, and climate change poses a rising threat to mental health and psychosocial well-being, from emotional distress to anxiety, depression, grief, and suicidal behavior. The mental health impacts of climate change are unequally distributed within certain groups disproportionately affected depending on factors such as socioeconomic status, gender, and age. Yet, despite this impact, large gaps exist in many countries between mental health needs and the availability and accessibility of mental health systems and services to address them. And when we think of youth, we see that more than half of all mental health conditions start before the age of 14 years. So there is a need to prioritize the promotion of mental health and the prevention of mental illness in the early stages of life. And at the same time, we know that there are distinct roles and relations of men and women in a given culture. And this is dictated by that cultural gender norms and values, which give rise to gender differences. And we know that gender norms, roles, and relations also give rise to gender inequalities. And both gender differences and gender inequalities can give rise to inequities between men and women in health status and access to healthcare. So for example, in the region of the Americas, depression continues to be the leading mental health disorder and is twice as frequent in women as in men. And when we look at the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, because we cannot forget about that, numerous national studies in the region have documented elevated rates of psychological distress, anxiety, and depression in the general population due to the pandemic. But at the same time, the mental health and well-being of some groups, such as women, young people, people with pre-existing mental health conditions, and people living in conditions of vulnerability have been particularly impacted by the pandemic. So it is clear that evidence-based approaches should aim to reduce risk factors and strengthen protective factors for these groups at the individual, family, community, and societal levels using a multi-sectoral approach. Women and men differ in their roles, their behaviors, and attitudes regarding actions that could help to mitigate climate change. And while several environmental, social, and economic determinants of mental health are negatively affected by climate change, and with certain groups disproportionately at risk from climate change-related hazards, the World Health Organization have recommended 5 key approaches to address these impacts. 1 is to integrate climate change considerations into policies and programs for mental health, including mental health and psychosocial support, to better prepare for and respond to climate crisis. 2, we need to integrate mental health and psychosocial support within policies and programs dealing with climate change and health. We need to build upon our global commitments. We need to implement multi-sectoral and community-based approaches to reduce vulnerabilities and address the mental health and psychosocial impact of climate change. And we need to address the large gaps that exist in funding for both mental health and for responding to the health impacts of climate change. So strengthening the link between mental health and climate change is an opportunity to create a more holistic and coordinated response in protecting the health of the population, especially for vulnerable groups such as our women and children. So I thank you, and I hand back over to you, Ashley.
Thank you, Dr. Malcolm, for those very important introductory remarks today. And at this time, we'll continue by unveiling the official video for the Hey campaign this year, which brings together experts and youth activists together, presenting a strong call to action on climate change and its impact on women and children's mental health. Some of the speakers in the video will also be some of the panelists who are present with us today. So we're definitely looking forward to your interaction with them. At this time, we'll now share our official video for the Hey campaign.
The United Nations Children's Fund reported that half the world's 2.2 billion children are at extremely high risk from the impacts of the climate crisis.
A good number of children across the globe are witnessing, experiencing, and knowing climate crisis while they grow up.
As a teenager, I'm worried about climate change in my future. We, young people, children and youth, are the ones who have contributed the least to climate change and the ones who will suffer the most from it. It's not fair, and it's affecting our mental health with eco-anxiety.
En Latinoamérica, 8.2 millones de menores entre los 5 y los 17 años trabajan, y aunque se sabe que las niñas y adolescentes mujeres son las que realizan en mayor proporción tareas del hogar y de cuidados, remunerados o no, las cifras brillan por su ausencia. Pero esto empeora con la crisis climática y junto a ello su salud mental al enfrentarse a un mayor número de catástrofes naturales.
I am a climate activist from Houston, a place that was really damaged by Hurricane Harvey, excess flooding, flash freezes, and so much more. So I know firsthand the impact that climate change can have on children's mental health.
It is generally believed that only extreme events of climate change can affect the mental health of people. But that's not true. Our lives depend on nature, and a minute event can impact us directly as well as indirectly.
Many people are aware of the physical health effects of climate change, but tend to overlook the dire impacts on the mental health and well-being of children around the world.
Rather than having childhood memories with nature, family and friends, they are having visuals of climate catastrophe in their mind. This mental health is leading to anxiety, stress and trauma, having long-term mental health impact on children.
This is incredibly stigmatizing and difficult to address at a time where young people's brains are still developing and need to be in a safe and healthy environment. Unfortunately, climate change has ripped that away from us and plundered our chances of the future.
It is no longer a looming threat, but rather a destructive reality. Its mental health outcomes range from stress, anxiety, and sleep disturbance to depression, schizophrenia, mania, survival guilt, and suicidal thoughts.
We all see the threats we face. Increases in hurricanes, wildfires, floods, heat waves, and other detrimental events. The impacts of this crisis can also delay children's mental development in various areas, including areas like cognition, language, behavior, learning, emotional regulation, and academic performance.
The people in future years who are not even born yet do not have any ability for their voices to be heard. The closest thing we have to represent them are the children who are going through such devastating times right now.
We want to say to the world and to people that we want to build the future. We and the next generations be able to live with good well-being, and we need to build this future right now.
This earth is the children's future, our future, and being given the giant burden we hold as a responsibility to save our future creates mountainous additional stress, especially when the adults truly responsible for this crisis refuse to care.
Let us solve this crisis within politics, companies and our communities, and devise a plan to not only confront climate change, but the aberrant incomprehensiveness we frequently face. We need not just the creation of solutions, but the equitable, fair access and dissemination of relevant resources to all individuals.
We would like girls and young women in Latin America and the Caribbean to have the tools for them and their communities to adapt to the consequences of climate change using advocacy campaigns and community projects.
Es urgente que las políticas sean más inclusivas e involucren a las niñas y los niños como a los jóvenes de comunidades de base en los espacios de toma de decisiones para que sean ellos quienes lideren acciones. Pero para lograrlo se deben garantizar los recursos y las plataformas necesarias.
Only climate justice can bring justice to mental health. So choose life over euthanasia. Together we can and we will.
We should be one in the fight against climate crisis. The world should be united. We can act now and we can come out of this crisis.
The spaces that we cherish and enjoy with our friends and family, for example, our parks, our schools, and our community centers, they are also at risk of becoming totally non-existent as we know it. So how then can we thrive for a healthier planet when many of our children and young persons are exposed to at least one climate and environmental hazard, which are creating incredibly challenging environments for our children to live, play, thrive, and survive? Ladies and gentlemen, that was our official video for the Hey Campaign 2022 on climate change and the impact it is having on women and children's mental health. At this time, some of our Hey ambassadors will now participate in an intergenerational discussion with Dr. Malcolm and Dr. Solange Jackson, Advisor, Family and Community Health of the Pan American Health Organization, to allow them to exchange and express their views as it relates to climate change and its impact on women and children's mental health. First up, we have Yazid, Hay Focal Point Liaison Officer representing the region of Africa. His question, goes to Dr. Solange Jackson. Yazid, you're muted.
Thank you, Ashley, for the warm introduction. I hope you can all hear me. And my question goes to Dr. Solange. I love that her background is community and family health. And the question I'm going to ask is, coming from a country where mental health is given maybe a lost concern and there is a lot of misconception about it, I was really happy to see that the recently released IPCC report have in it the impact of climate change on mental health. So my ask to you now is, what do you think countries in the global south can do better to address the impact of climate change on mental health of women and children, especially the ones in rural and marginalized communities? Thank you.
May I respond? Thank you, Ashley. May I go, Ashley?
Yes, you can.
Thank you so much, Yazid. And that's a reality in, I can say, sub-Saharan Africa, because mental health is still taboo. There's still a lot of ignorance and no awareness about mental health. So for this country that needs political implication and political willingness to address that subject, we need to help the countries, okay? We need to help the countries and the politics to take that into account. Mental health should be addressed on all its forms, and we have to start from communities. While we have to start from communities, we have to go in these communities, educate the people, let them know what is mental health, inform them, because they're culturally, they think they have a lot of stories that they think this is it. Is not, they don't think it's an illness or it has to be addressed medically or to get support. They don't think at all about that. So we need to address starting from communities and then get the political willingness and awareness as well to support any intervention that should be done in the communities. But the roots has to be into the communities. And we have tools, we have all the materials that we can help countries to address mental health, and for women especially. Hope I address your, and Dr. Malcolm can add something.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just a follow-up, I know globally people will be seeing this. I just want to ask you, what will be your call to action for policymakers in these countries? Because, you know, talking about the impact of mental health on women, we have issues where families are being displaced from their homes and they have this mental distress, anxiety, and children tend to grow up with so much mental disability in them, which some of them know and some of them do not know. So it is critical that the government also come into the matter and do something. So as a person that has background in community and family health, what would be your call to action? I believe you know what this impact could mean to them, right? Especially those who are in places where there is this, should I say, maybe there is this riot, or they are being displaced generally.
Or any situation.
Yeah. So what would be your call to action to policymakers in those kind of countries and to young people as well? Because personally, I join with my colleagues to kind of educate women and children and try to engage policymakers. But in your own perspective, what would be your call to action to policymakers and what can young people do better?
Thank you, Azidi. I think you have already started with a good strategy, but as youth, as young people in the communities, if you are informed, you are equipped efficiently to address this problem in your community, you are the actor we need. You are the pillar we need to take action for this, to address mental health in any communities, not only Sub-Saharan Africa. Every community is where they still don't address mental health, and address mental health related to climate change or to any other hazard, we need youth, we need adolescents. So, and we will help you. We are, as I said, WHO have all the tools needed to capacitate you to help your own government, to help decision makers to address mental health. But I will let Dr. Malcolm to talk a bit more about strategies and policies.
Thank you, Dr. Kobe Jackson and Yazid, thank for that question. And just to add to what Dr. Kobe Jackson mentioned, and what you mentioned as well, in terms of mental health itself and the stigmatization that goes with mental health, whether in Africa, whether in the Caribbean, it is a general problem globally. So what you are doing as a foundation and as youth ambassadors, increasing the awareness and linking mental health and talking openly about mental health is one of the first steps. Creating the awareness, increasing persons' ability to speak openly about mental health is one step closer to, improving and strengthening our mental health program. And in terms of reducing stigma, you also mentioned the whole thing of community and ensuring the involvement of the community. And as Dr. Kobe Jackson mentioned, WHO and PAHO, our drive and the support that we have been given to the country is to deinstitutionalize mental health, is to make mental health services readily available in the community. And a lot of time we tend, people in general, due to lack of knowledge and awareness, tend to confuse mental health, mental wellness with mental disorder. So a person are feeling stressed, person are feeling depressed, they're afraid to speak about it because they don't want to be labeled as being mad, right? But we have to get this information out there that the same way that a woman can take their child to the wellness clinic for checkup is the same way that youth, women, and the general public should be able to go to your health center in your community for a mental wellness checkup. So this is the kind of environment that we really want to continue to create and promote. And generally, our call to action in this context of climate change is really to ask government to accelerate the strategies for implementing climate resilient mechanism. And importantly is to bring women and youth into that conversation, because a lot of time policymakers tend to focus on what we think we can do without the involvement and input of you in the community. And as your video mentioned, you're the future. Whatever we're doing now that is impacting negatively on the climate, the youth are the ones that are going to have that to deal with in the future. So we definitely have to make sure that you are involved as youth, women are involved in discussing and coming up with those strategies that are necessary to deal with the issues that we currently face.
Thank you so much, Dr. Taraline and Dr. Solange. I so much love the call to action, specifically very important, every other aspect you talked about, because here there are some communities that access to the services is really difficult for them. And that is where government and civil society organizations need to come in and work together toward ensuring that these people have maybe access to mental health services, since they are the ones that are impacted by it the most. You can imagine women thinking of, oh, my house is gone. I don't have anywhere to stay no more. And children, flooding and everything. So thank you so much. And I'll remain committed to doing what I'm doing. And I believe if any government in this country get to see this, they will be charged to take full responsibility and do the needful. Thank you, everyone. It's such a pleasure. I'll pass the mic back to Ashley.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yazid. Next, we'll move on to Jody Metcalf. Hey, ambassador representing Europe, and also she's one of the volunteers under the Lashley Foundation. Jody, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Lovely to speak to you today. My question is for Dr. Malcolm. I was going to ask, how do we cope with eco-anxiety, and do you think it affects our ability to stay motivated as climate activists?
Yes, so I do believe that there is a lot more that needs to be done in terms of creating the awareness in terms of climate change in general and the impact that climate change has on individual, whether it is that the anxiety, whether it's the depression, whether it's the fear, because we understand, and especially when you live in a small island developing states where the vulnerability in terms of the changes in the climate, whether it's for hurricane or other hazards, you tend to be anxious and fearful that at any time something can happen. So the first, as mentioned, is really to create that awareness, which is one, and understand that these are realistic feelings that can occur because of the impact that climate change has had or is having on our environment and the implication for our mental health. And to deal with this is really a holistic approach that is necessary. We have to create that supportive environment that will allow women and children to be able to feel comfortable to reach out when they're feeling or they're not at their best, right? We need to ensure that services are readily available and accessible. And we understand that there are different barriers to availability. There are different barriers to access. In some cases, a facility may be located far away, so transportation is an issue. And then you look at the interconnectivity between one area being the focus of what you want to do and the other area being the implications. So for example, getting to the health facility, you need transportation. But depending on the type of transportation, that is also contributing to the climate challenge. So how do we create that balance to ensure that the services that we are providing is in reach of the population that are most in need, and at the same time is not negatively impacting on the climate? And that's why we really advocate for mental health services at the community level. And WHO and PAHO has a program we call the MH Gap, Mental Health Gap Action Program, that is building capacity of persons within our community at the health centers. So these are non-mental health trained specialists, because many of the mental health conditions that we face, whether it's the anxiety, whether it's the fear, the depression, these don't require specialized services. But for government, they tend to invest a lot in the institution. So you have a psychiatric hospital that gets a lot of the resources, but the persons at the community level are lacking the resources. So the MH Gap builds the capacity of these non-psychiatrics, non-mental health persons to be able to interact with persons when you visit your facility for any reason. As I mentioned, whether it is prenatal care, whether it is taking a loved one to the facility, because again, women are the most time the caregivers, and they're the one that will go to take a family member to a health center. But any interaction with the health center should also be an opportunity for our healthcare workers to reach out, assess, and provide the necessary intervention. We also have tools, as Dr. Kobe Jackson mentioned, where we're able to build capacity of ordinary community members in psychosocial first aid, or psychological first aid, right? So just as when a person will get a cut and you're able to know exactly what to do, similarly, an approach can be taken for mental health. So I do believe that we need to increase awareness. We need to accelerate actions at the community level to be able to deal with the challenges that comes with climate change and those impact on mental health. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think I agree that eco-anxiety is something that I've only recently learned as even a term, and having it more as something, if you go to the doctor for anything, I think having more of a everyday and normalizing of it would be something that was really important and helpful for people to know that they're not irrational in their fears.
Yeah.
Thank you.
May I add something for Judy?
Yes, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you. I would like to add to what Dr. Malcolm said, that if we want to focus on empowering youth and adolescents for this mental health, you guys have to be informed. You can be capacitated. You can provide the first psychology support in your community, and you can mostly we will capacitate you to identify who needs support. So once you provide those early supports, it will not escalate to more difficult medical condition or more difficult mental condition that will need further support. So, and there is so many, based on climate change, it brings a lot of disaster, a lot of people migrating as well due to climate change. And with this immigration as well, people move from their own habitat to another place, and they will develop some mental health. We should not forget that immigration also is impacted by climate change and also can bring some mental health situation that we need to address. And we count on you guys, youth and adolescents, we count on you to address that, to identify within your own community, within your own family, within your own circle of friends who might need some mental health support, and you can be able to provide that support. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Jody, I don't know if you have any final comments before we move on to Bodhi.
I don't. It was just very enlightening, and thank you very much.
Okay, great. So our final question is now from Bodhi Patel, co-founder of Sea Dragon Studios. Bodhi, over to you.
Hi, so my name is Bodhi Patel and I work with the University of Exeter on their Ocean and Human Health campaign. And there are many studies done that show the effect of young people and women and children being exposed to natural blue and green spaces and how that increases their mental health and well-being, physical outcomes. So my question is geared towards more around what institutions and organizations can do collectively. It's for both Dr. Malcolm and Dr. Kobe Jackson. And it is, what is the most effective way to drive intergenerational collaboration for these outcomes that we want to see in terms of ocean, climate, environment, and human health nexus? And what are some career pathways for youth to get involved within WHO and your organizations?
Thank you, Bodhi. Excellent question. We definitely, as you mentioned, the intergenerational dialogue that is taking place right now is just that great opportunity, right? And we have to continue to do more of this. While, as I mentioned earlier, policymakers or those in decision-making position, based on research that have been done, based on evidence that they have an idea as to what strategies need to be put in place to tackle the problem. But many times they're not on the ground, they're not in the community, they're not seeing a lot of the impact or the challenges that currently exist out there in the community. So we may have beautiful plans on paper, but the practicality of implementation in the community is sometimes a challenge. So having dialogues like these, where the youth and women and others within the community have that opportunity to have discussion with persons in certain positions that are in this position to make decision and have the authority and power to implement, is necessary, because you, again, you're on the ground, you're able to see the impact of these action, and you're able to give guidance and support where that need is. The whole thing in terms of that institutional approach, and we mentioned about the multi-sectoral, the all of government, all of a society approach is so crucial. And I mentioned earlier about the link and implication between the pollutant, the actions that are creating and contributing to the problem, and at the same time, the need that these actions are catering to. So we spoke about the transportation. We also, in terms of urban planning, in developing a community, there's certain infrastructure that needs to be in place. But many times, the whole thing of that green eco space to facilitate and encourage physical activity or outdoor space to allow persons to exercise, to breathe, to enjoy the fresh air, which is a positive impact on mental health and wellness, is a lot of time not taken into consideration during these discussions. And again, because many times the youth are not sitting at the table with these discussion, with these policymakers. So we have to scale up the interactions and the dialogue between young people, between persons in the community and those in the executive and decision-making position. We have to increase the awareness of the population in general about the impact of climate actions, the impact of climate change, and and why it necessitates certain action to combat those implications that are taking place. And of course, as you mentioned, in terms of that career pathway, it is really critical. And when we talk to young people and you try to decide on a profession or a career or a pathway to take, it's always important to look at what currently exists. What are some of the impact, or what are some of the challenges that are anticipated in the future? And of course, climate change. So any career within the aspect of sustainable development, within the aspect of urban planning and support and climate mitigation are great areas for young people to want to go into as they aim and contribute towards improving and strengthening the environment and contributing to better physical and mental and emotional health. So I'll hand over to Solans if you want to add anything.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you, Patty, for the great question. I would like just to say that I can repeat myself, we count on youth and adolescents. So we're up for the decision makers or new policies. That's why we are encouraging country to have youth as stakeholders before any policy being developed. So we have to consult the youth so that you can provide your own insights, your own strategy that your age group can understand, because we are old and we think on the past when we were young, that is beyond us. So we have to look at you guys. You are the one who use most the social media. You are the one who does not go out all the time because you chat with your friend. I see young people when they go out, let's hang out. They go out, but end up each of you on his own device. When we are trying to tell you, go out, walk, enjoy the breeze, enjoy the view, but you are the one who have to tell us how we can let you go hang out and enjoy that hangout and be healthy. Mostly you have to be healthy. So we will do and continue encouraging countries and governments to use the young people as stakeholders so that we can address the problem together based on your view, based on your idea and strategies that every young in the world can understand. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point in regards to technology, right? We're so interconnected with our devices and oftentimes we don't look up. Just adding to the point on coupling career pathways and opportunities for young people to be in co-decision making processes. I think oftentimes I was at the UN last week at the General Assembly, and oftentimes I was told, young people have an incredible role to play, like we need to shape the future, etc. Secretary General said it himself. We know this. We just need the opportunities, the funding, and the career pathways so we can also go ahead and do this. And I think that gap is something that's still missing, something that's being filled in by many national administrations, by WHO, by many others, including UNICEF. And it's going to be slow because these big bureaucracies are, but I think we're helping to expedite that process. And that process is critical for the development of both ocean health, human health, and environmental health, especially for children and young people. And we have to continue pushing hard. And that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Wow, I can say we started today's intergenerational discussion with a bang. And I will just want to say thank you to Dr. Malcolm and Dr. Jackson of the Pan American Health Organization, WHO, and the youth representatives in which we had today, Yazid, Jody, and Bodhi. Thank you. It was really an intriguing and insightful dialogue that we saw today, and this is why we believe that it's so important that us as young persons are engaged meaningfully within I don't want to say that you're old, Dr. Jackson or Dr. Malcolm, but within the older generation. So now our summit will officially begin with session 1 entitled Strengthening Climate Action, Women and Girls Leading the Response. Women and girls leading the response. And we'll not only highlight the work of women and girls in climate action globally, but also to provide robust discussions on how current and future climate action can be strengthened, seeing questions such as why it is important to strengthen climate action led by women and girls, how current climate action can be strengthened through more practical solutions and feminist-led approaches, championing women and girls' rights and equality. This session is being moderated. By Deaney, Gellizeau, our Hay Ambassador representing St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Over to you, Deaney.
All right, thank you, Ashley. Bienvenidos a todos, bienvenido al mundo. Welcome, Idadi. Welcome, everyone, to our first panel for the day, Strengthening Climate Action, Women and Girls Leading the Response. I am your moderator for this session, Gellizeau from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I am Hay Ambassador for that country, as well as president of a local youth organization. Today in this session, as you look forward, we will be talking about how the work of women in climate action and be providing us discussions how the current and future climate action can be strengthened, seeing more practical solutions being led by women and championed by girls. For our panelists this morning, we have some lovely women here with us this morning. First there's Alejandra, Quiquantar, climate activist, Marinel, Ubaldo, advocacy officer for ecological justice, and Adriana, climate finance senior associate at the Center for Clean Air. All right, so we'll get straight in session. All right, so first things first, and it's to highlight the direction that climate action has taken recently. And as Ashley herself and many other persons this morning have mentioned, climate change affects women disproportionately. I think that we can that fact. And we know that this could be attributed to a lot of things, but one of the main aspects that we see in conversations when we get into that is the matter of inequality. So my first question this morning, that would be to you, Alejandra. What does it mean to put gender equality at the center of climate solutions or climate action? All right, so before we proceed, just one more thing that I should highlight is that in the interest of time, we have 3 minutes for you to answer your questions. So let me just question, which is directed to you, Alejandra. The question is, what does it mean to put gender equality at the center of climate solutions?
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the word. More to the youth that are speaking right now. The problem that we have with technology sometimes, it affects us a lot. The climate change affects us a lot, especially to the most poor people and the most vulnerable people, mostly to women and children. They are suffering the most consequences during this. Nevertheless, we're still here, creating different type of options for this. The knowledge and abilities that the women have are unique, and they can help us with the climate change, and they can be especially effective. So this has to be in the center of our work. Example, us in this organization has to be for women, and we look to create strategies for us to make a better biodiversity design, so we can make a participation of the community and the entity of our government. I feel very happy for being here right now in this panel with this women leadership and the importance of women and gender equality. And it's ideal for us to create a gender equality world so we can help this climate change. As a leader, I think that our voices are being ignored, that they don't take our advices, they don't listen to women. So we need to start taking advantage of this and try to make women be better helping these persons with the youth environment. And we want to help women and kids to make a better transition and make it be just. If we're talking about leadership that is also effective as a man, it's necessary for us to make decisions, especially talking about climate. By the other hand, the data that the thoughts about women in politics can help approve other type of laws to help the climate change. We also need to help out the women and kids so they can get a career in these areas and create more work for these people. Right now, it's a minority of people that are in this career. This would start in the first part of the education, from when they're small to when they're growing. It would make a great advancement. So we can help out with this. We actually made some compromises so we can invest with school centers and other platforms that connect women and kids, especially to the communities where they need help. So we can increase the knowledge and the access to the financing services, including the financing services that are digital, talking about climate. We need to get together and try to be together with this program, creating different access juridically. And we also have discriminatory norms what the women and kids have usually these days, especially in my country. And as for the agents from the public sector, that they compromise to help us with these mental health care programs. I thank you all for talking about this importance and for being here for women and kids. But before, I got to mention that women that are in first line and take decisions, it's necessary to create a program for mental health care for the communities that are more vulnerable, for these platforms that need help. So I thank you a lot, and that's what I could talk about this gender equality.
All right, so thank you for that response, Alejandra. I totally love the response. And I would have thought you mentioned that as a leader, you believe that your voice is not being. And it's just something that's distorting me, because when you look at some countries, especially in the South, there is a high proportion of women actually leading frontline climate action. So just a bit of a follow-up question. Is there like a trend that you can see where small, developing countries where women are willing to take this action, or otherwise?
Perdón, ¿podría nuevamente hacer la pregunta? Porque no está la traducción, no alcancé a escuchar completamente la pregunta.
She's asking if you can repeat the question, please.
Okay, so let me just rephrase it, right? So in smaller developing countries, there is, you see a higher capacity in leadership positions taking frontline action. So I'm asking if there is a trend.
Bueno, es sumamente importante que
it's really important that the girls and the women that are more vulnerable to these catastrophes, they have to take important decisions. But for this, it's necessary to guarantee the tools and platforms necessary for this. I would get to eliminate these barriers, these discriminatory barriers, with these experiences and these financial topics. It's really important to generate finances for these type of programs, especially in those countries that don't have really much development, especially for the youth. But also we need that they should be in the decision making and make these different type of careers for them to help us with this economy. We see a minority of women in these type of careers. And this situation of some public places is still, the government should try to eliminate these barriers for these youth and especially women to be able to access these finances, since these are barriers that we should really take away from there so these people can do this. So I think it's really important that three things are important here: that they find themselves, that they do these objectives that they have, but we also got to guarantee the platforms, the tools, and everything for them to be able to help out themselves. And then there is a dialogue between the government for the women and kids without a barrier of experience.
All right, so I totally love the fact as well. Thank you for that response. I totally love the fact as well that you also highlighted that one of the barriers for
Hi, good day. Can you guys hear Deaney, or did he stay?
Yeah, I think it's lit.
Okay. Hi, Deaney. You disconnected just now. Can we?
Yes.
Hey, you can continue.
Right. Well, okay. So I'll just go. So I'm looking at an article here, and it would have stated that women typically have less capacity and resources to prepare.
Apologies for Deaney's technical difficulties, guys, for this panel. And just giving him 1 quick second to join or reconnect. If not, I'll have to jump into Deaney's place and ask the questions to our panelists who are here today. But no, like, today's conversation is really important because we know that the issue and the effect of climate change on women's mental health, because they're disproportionately affected, as said in the intergenerational discussion, is something that we really need to discuss amongst us as stakeholders, and it needs to be a multi-sectorial approach when it comes to persons engaging in these conversations. I'm so sorry that Deaney is having some technical difficulties, but that happens when you're on an online platform. And did he join Deaney?
Yes, he's here.
Yes, I am very sorry about that. I tested my Wi-Fi like 10 times this morning and it's still giving me this problem. All right, so hopefully it does not because we need to get through this interesting discussion this morning. All right, so I'll just get straight to the questions. So basically, findings from the report that I was referring to, that has sparked the discussion for what is known as gender responsive climate financing. So, Adriana, my first question to you is, can you explain, well, for persons who would be listening, what is meant by this term, gender responsive climate financing?
Thank you, Deaney. Thank you so much for the invitation, to the organizers, to the amazing panelists, and of course to the Lashley Foundation for the kind invitation. Our previous panelist, Alejandra, she explained very well how climate change hazards affect women and how they create more gender inequalities and how finance can actually breach that gap of gender inequalities, right? But I want to give a little bit of facts of how climate change actually increases existing gender inequalities and why that climate change contributes to greater climate change vulnerability of many women. And this is largely due to persistent gender norms and widespread gender discriminations that deny women income, legal rights, and access to resources or political participation, while assigning them the primary role in caring for their families and providing for their livelihoods. Also, women are more affected than men by climate hazards because they lack access to and control over productive sources, which is education, information, technology, and especially finance. A few examples of how climate change is not gender neutral and affects more dramatically women than men are that women face barriers to live in areas prone to climate change because of their caregiving obligations or lack of financial assets or limited rights to land and property. And when they do manage to leave those areas prone to climate change, well, they face high risk of unemployment, child marriage, human trafficking, and gender-based violence. Also, women face disproportionately high health risk from effects of climate change. Increases in temperature, rainfall, and humidity create favorable conditions for diseases such as malaria, dengue fever, and Zika virus, which can cause miscarriages, premature birth, and anemia among pregnant women. Also, it's important to notice that there are gender-specific threats that are used to silence female environmental leaders. Female environmental defenders consistently experience disproportionately higher rates of gender-based violence as a result of their activism, which can cause verbal abuse, harassment, intimidation, exclusion, and even abuse. Right? Also, women are excluded from decision-making spaces in climate change negotiations. Men still fill 67% of climate-related decision-making roles, and women's representation in national and international climate negotiating bodies remains below 30%. So, a little bit of overview of that gender is not, and that climate is not gender neutral. It's why we need to create gender responsive climate finance. And gender responsive climate finance means that finance for climate action bridges the gap of gender inequalities by making sure that women have equal access to resources, legal rights, political participation, entrepreneurship, and decision making in climate decisions. According to the latest global landscape of climate finance, which is developed by the Climate Policy Initiative, CPI, there was an increase of 42% of global climate finance in the last decade. Excellent news, right? However, despite increased international dialogue on women being crucial stakeholders and consumers of climate finance interventions, less than 2% of the total climate investments in 2021 was gender responsive. That's a really big imbalance of actually where is the climate finance going, right? And the problem is that climate finance instruments do not acknowledge and address these structural gender inequalities through their funding. Building climate resilience while being gender blind means disregarding women as vital stakeholders and significantly impact the results and undermine the sustainability of funded intervention. But it's not always about disregarding women, but supporting a non-virtual circle that it's damaging and exacerbating gender inequalities. Very often, decision makers believe that tackling climate change is forgetting about other sustainability goals, right? It's like climate change is the ultimate goal, but the objective is to actually finance climate action while making sure we're not harming other sustainability goals, such as gender equality. Therefore, I believe it's very important to recognize that whenever we're discussing about climate finance and the international negotiations with international organizations, we're making sure that it's gender responsive climate finance. So we're quantifying the impacts and the results, and we're actually quantifying how much we're hoping to bridge the gap of gender inequalities. Over to you, Deaney.
Yes, thank you, Adriana. And I do agree with you on many points. And even in my country, I believe that the lack of gender responsive climate financing is really a sad situation. And I would just reflect back on the climate change policy that was published in 2019, and there was no mention of addressing, these sort of inequalities that as a result of climate change. So it just goes to show that many of the dialogues that we have, turning them into action is a problem. Which brings me to my next question. What are some of your suggestions then?
I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question again?
Okay, so the question is, what are some of your suggestions for improving access to climate financing?
Sure. Some of my suggestions are we need to measure and track climate financial flows and resources that are coming from the private sector and the public sector, right? There are measures and then indicators of how to track climate finance, and there are methodologies from different international organizations. So we need to make sure that we are actually tagging and we're actually understanding where is the gender responsive climate finance. We also need to invest in capacity development for supporting gender mainstreaming efforts, not only in climate change, but also in environmental decisions and sustainability decisions. We need to provide targeted capacity development and empowerment for women, such as what Alejandra just explained in her intervention. And that means including at the local level, right? What we need to do, it's a bottom-up approach, and it's actually support and encourage women to bring their voices, their needs, their potential, perspective, priorities. And what do they think about climate technologies, finance, and policies? And why is this relevant for climate finance and climate funds? Another way, it's increase accessibility of climate finance mechanisms for local women's groups and feminist groups and movements by exploring another options for financial intermediation, bridging mechanisms to break down larger fund projects to be channeled to women's group. And also, I believe we need to have a dedicated or a special window for program for women's and women's organizations and attract complementary financial resources for investment in gender responsive climate actions. I believe that we can also have these special windows of financing from microfinance institutions credit unions, public-private funds, insurance companies, having an insurance only for women, right? Impact investment companies, crowdfunding that it's especially targeted for women. And banks and insurance companies also, we need to provide broader credit of lines and broader financial instruments that can bring women into the table. Another one that I just remember, it's like actually trying to come with fintech solutions that we take financial solutions with technology. So women which are in remote areas and are not living in urban areas, they can have access also to finance, and they don't depend on other person in their families to get access to the finance that they need for their projects.
Sounds great. Sounds like some very concrete solutions. So, of course, since this panel is needed to the response of climate action, I always like to jump back at the main focus here. That is leadership, right? Now, many organizations I've done a lot of reading. So many other organizations, they have outlined that a lot of women lead frontline action. A lot of women are talking. A lot of women are raising their voices, right? But when it comes to decision making, that is totally different story as it comes to presentation. So this question, as a feminist leader in our various communities, this question will be directed to you, right? And that question is, how do we ensure that women are represented in environmental decision making, same level as they're leading in frontline action and activism? So, because, okay, right, so let me just go off tangent here, because many of the times, and before doing a lot of the research I did, persons would equate activism as decision making. People think that once they see you out in the communities, once they see you out in the work at the grassroots level, that is the same thing as decision making processes. But there are two very different areas of climate action, so to speak. And in one area, where they're fairly represented, which is taking the action on the local level, probably at the national, as opposed to decision making, they are very underrepresented. So how do we ensure that the same level of work that women put in on the field is represented in decisions made by governments or international bodies? Yes, right.
Hi, Deaney. Sorry, I can't really. Can you hear me okay?
The audio is breaking a bit, just a bit.
Is it breaking? Oh no.
It's fine. Yeah.
It's fine. Okay, is that question for me, right?
Yes, that question also you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Our other panelists have already said it very perfectly already earlier today. But we can really deny that women and girls are disproportionately affected by the climate crisis. Like even during and after disasters, women's needs and rights are being taken away. So even like after disaster, rape cases increase in evacuation centers and even in communities, and there is a lack of electricity, a lot of clean water, a lot of gender sensitive toilets, and lack of security enabled gender based and the lack of security actually enables gender based violence. So even after a disaster, women and girls are the first ones to drop out of school and are sent to big cities to work so they can support their families back home. And I know this is not very common in a lot of places, but in a close knit community like the Philippines, children have to support their parents and their families. And this is only not true in the Philippines. We also have a case now unfolding in Pakistan with the tragedy that is continuing to unfold there. So there is also a lack of, I know this is already also discussed earlier, but that is true. Now, there is a lack of economic opportunity for women, and that is becoming a major barrier to women in developing countries and marginalized communities to get involved in climate activism and even in leadership positions in climate action. So, women, what's good about women is that we don't usually think in boxes. So, we women are really good at seeing relationships between things and, understanding and stopping the climate crisis. Is one of those times when we have to realize the interconnectedness of everything in the world. And we have to understand how, driving gas car in our countries is affecting the coral reefs in the other side of the world. Example, now I am here in America, so like a lot of things that are happening now, I mean that people are doing now could affect the other countries and the other side of the world. And we have to understand that climate is not just, an environmental issue or just a matter of meteorology. It is also a matter of livelihood. It is a matter of social justice. It is a matter of national security, of health. And it connects to a lot of different things, like even tourism, even winter sports, even like um, a lot of things. So we need women to creatively to continue thinking outside the box to be able to solve such a complex and far-ranging problem such as the climate change. And as we mentioned earlier, women have been facing a lot of particular challenges, and we have seen that even if a climate crisis is already at our doorstep and it is affecting people of all genders, we're seeing that perspectives on and decisions about how to tackle and solve the climate crisis have been made mainly by men who even speak only on behalf of a fraction of the population. And we need everyone to be on board in order to solve the climate crisis. And we will not have an inclusive and diverse solution if we will not include voices of the marginalized in the discussion. Um, and women have been juggling being mothers, raising households, being sister, being daughters, being friend or a member of a community, while all trying to insist our positions in spaces that should include us in the very first place. And a lot of leadership positions are not given to women, even sometimes negotiator role, because they said that women are emotional. But our being emotional is not a weakness. Our ability to feel is what connects us more to people and the issues that we have. And that emotion drives us to work hard to put solutions to the problems that we see. And I even experienced that myself. I was made to feel that because I am a woman, my only role in the society is to be a mother, to raise a household. But because of my experience, I can feel and I realize that women can truly be part of nation building and that we can be an effective leader along with our other roles. So I just think that we need to look for ways so we can change the way we see gender, because I believe that our emotional capacity as women is an asset, and emotions drives action. As I said earlier, it makes us see what's fair when we are in negotiation tables. That is why storytelling is effective, because the storyteller can connect us with the audience. And I just wish that there will be more women who will be given more platform, more leadership position, so we can take on the roles that are that women deserve, and we can be really part of nation building.
Yeah, yeah, definitely agree. And on the point of emotion being an asset, uh, in fact, we know that this is true because, well, when persons lead with emotion, it's actually been proven that this drives form of transparency. And that is also very important when being in decision making. So my last question, and any panelist can answer this, is what are some suggestions then that we can now put forward here in order to show that women are equipped with the necessary resources, effective leadership, empowerment, and resilience, climate resilience?
I'm sorry, I maybe have missed the first part of the question. Can you repeat that for me, please?
Okay. All right. So the question is, what are some suggestions that we can place forward here to ensure that women and girls are equipped with the necessary resources for climate empowerment, leadership, and resilience?
I can go, if I may. I think information is key, right? Information and data is key. We cannot think that all projects and all programs related to climate change and environment affect the same to women and men. So we really need to differentiate how the impact and how the different kind of projects and financing that international organizations in the public and the private sector are deploying for climate action. So we need to really understand how is it affecting and how is it affecting different women and men. So I think information is number one. Spaces for open dialogue, such as this one, right? And start to promoting these kind of conversations more and more at all the levels, the youth level, also international organizations, public sector, private sector. And something that I have seen that I believe it's very interesting is peer-to-peer collaboration or mentorship programs where women feel that they can relate to other people on their same field or, in their communities about what their experience in climate change and how they want to start taking leadership roles in their organizations or communities. Over to you, Deaney.
So, Dr. Daisley, I see your hand up.
Yes, a pleasant good morning to everyone. In listening to the panel, I want to hear more about the collaborative efforts of organizational social responsibility, and what role do you guys think employers play in creating an organizational culture that promotes female empowerment and gender equality?
I can answer that. Thank you so much for that question. That is really, really interesting because I just came from a global Clinton Global Initiative during the Climate Week and World Economic Forum sessions, and these topics are really like always being discussed in this kind of sessions. And I just think that we need more employers to really trust women to be, because it doesn't cost you anything if you hire women, right? So we need to hire more women to give them economic opportunities to be actually be part of the workspace, to give them the access to these opportunities, to because having work, having economic having that economic opportunity empowers women. It gives us more value because we can actually afford what we want instead of just depending on our partners or our parents. So that is one way to actually empower women, to give more economic opportunities, because it doesn't really cost anyone to hire women. If you want to choose women to fill a certain position, you're being assured that that task will be filled with a lot of enthusiasm and, I guess, more compassion, and women are skilled. We are skilled. I just think that we need to put more trust on women, and really believe that being emotional, being a mother, being a sister, and our gender is a weakness, because those our asset as being, I mean, our characteristic as being women is putting us up front of solutions in the problems. So yes, I guess it is giving more economic opportunities for women, and hiring more women in spaces, in businesses, in private organizations, in government, because we need a lot of that. We need to show that women are capable, and we are actually trusting them, and not just inviting them for a talk and say how our women actually play a role in nation building, but then forget about them after a conference or a talk.
All right, so thank you. So I wish that we could continue this dialogue for the rest of the morning. However, we are out of time. If you do have questions, you can leave them in the Q&A section, and we'll try our best to answer them. All right, so I also want to thank all of our panelists here this morning, Marinel, Alejandra, as well as Adriana, for taking the time out to answer questions this morning. And I hope from this dialogue we can see more ways that we can strengthen climate action led by women and girls. All right, so with that said, we'll now conclude this panel, and I will now turn back over to you, Ashley.
Thank you very much, Deaney. Thank you to all the panelists for sharing your contributions and being involved.